Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I'm Ziad. I'm the founder of Kumbu, which is a digital memory box. I'm not going to talk about it today. I promise I'll try to make sure everyone gets on the boat on time.
Yes,
I'll go a little bit faster. What I want to talk about is something that is common for many startups. This is my first year at MyData. I'm building a startup that handles some personal data, but I believe that everybody building a new service on the internet now is faced with similar problems. So I wanted to share a little bit about this topic with you, and maybe we can continue the conversation on the boat. My hypothesis is as follows. It's now faster than ever to build a new service and make it available on the internet. From idea to MVP, if you know your way around technology, you can get online and start getting customer and start getting data really, really fast. That velocity has trade-offs. Typically, when we're building new services, we discuss trade-offs in terms of security, in terms of cost, in terms of scalability. What I'm suggesting and what I'm advocating is that we add privacy to the list of trade-offs we consider when we're picking third-party services to build our startups. Let's look at the customer data a startup typically collects. The first part, and that's probably the subject for another talk, is what the customers think they're giving you. And I'll mention it here because even for privacy-focused startups and privacy-focused users, people generally underestimate the amount of data they're giving to your company and they're giving to your service. And that underestimation, it creates a gap, and that gap creates a problem in how do you communicate effectively to customers what you're doing with their data and how do you obtain an informed consent from them. The second part is what you're actually collecting, the data that you're using internally to provide the service for customers. Again, I'm not going to talk about that today, but you need to design or to be thinking about proper process around this, and a lot of the talks at MyData are centered around that. What I really want to talk about is the stuff that we're sometimes leaking, we're sometimes sharing with third-party providers without really thinking about it. If we look at the services that startup typically outsource, a lot of them turn around marketing. So analytics is one. How many new companies, if you look at a service like Product Hunt that signals new startups launching, for the past few weeks I've been looking at every one of them, and every one of them is powered by Google Analytics. Now, social sharing buttons. If you have a share button, a Facebook share button on every page of your application, you're linking your user behavior to Facebook, and that can be an issue both for user privacy but also for your own ability to scale if you're going in a field where Facebook might be a competitor. CRM or messaging apps, things like Intercom, MailChimp for email automation. All these tools makes it very easy to send out a newsletter, keep in touch with customers. Every time you integrate such service, you're leaking a little bit of customer data. And we're now seeing more developer-oriented tools as well, such as error messages handling, tools like Papertrail, Rollbar, that aggregate all your logs. This is very efficient. What's in your log? There may be some personal identifiable information, so you should also be aware of that. Let me take a breath here. All this, I'm not advocating for not using any of these services. We've made our own choices with my company, but what we've tried to come up is a framework for us with fairly simple questions to ask ourselves before integrating such a service. And the first one that I encourage you to ask yourself is, do we actually need it? And that's a very good question to ask of Google Analytics. Google Analytics is a free tool. The data policy of Google with your customer data is very, very vague, even more so than other tools. And generally, if you look at a pay-for tool like MailChimp or Intercom, they will protect your data as a customer. So they will not give your information without to a judge, without a warrant. They will respect your usage as a customer, but they will also be very vague about what they do with the data about your own customers, because your customers aren't their customers. They're just data to them. So and I don't want to single out any particular company here, but it's very easy for them to ask a question such as, for a particular email address, how many tools powered by our service this particular email address is using. So this kind of usage is very vague in their privacy policies. So do we really need it? What do they say about the usage of your customer data, not you as a customer, but your customer data? If we contact them about it, do they seem aware of it? And for us, we've got great responses for some companies and no responses from others, and that's generally a red flag. And the fourth one is, what can you filter so that you don't leak personal identifiable information to these companies if you don't need to do it? And so typically for us, we went over all of our logs to make sure there's no email, there's no data that goes into error messages if we're sending that to a third party. We only share user ID within our CRM and within our Slack integration, and we only share emails with MailChimp for people who have opted in to go to our mailing list. That's the first bit. The second part is, how do you actually communicate with your customers about the third party you're using? And part of my presence in MyData is to try to find a good answer to this question. And I'd be happy to hear your thought about that. What we found out by trial and error is that if you say too much, people get scared. And if you don't say enough, then you don't feel entirely comfortable with it. So what we've come up to right now is that we have a complete list of all the third-party services that we use. And this is part of our terms and services. This is in our privacy policy. It's on our blog. We're very open about it. And we've provided contact information for people who want to know more about what exact data we exchange. We get maybe a question every other week by a privacy-minded user, so we have answers and we're happy to answer. But we found that not sharing this information immediately in the privacy policy worked better, because it's having it out in the open scared more users than we anticipated. So I think there's a lot of work to be done for, and I'll close here, but there's a lot of work to be done in educating users and the community at large, so that we can communicate clearly on what are the privacy implications of the services they're using. And so I'll close out here so that everybody can get on the boat, but my key take here is that make privacy and your customer privacy part of the trade-off you consider when picking a third-party service to accelerate your development. Thank you. Thank you. I will tweet a longer article on the topic that will have my presentation.